As soon as my parents stepped into my home, I could feel a storm brewing. My mother's eyes darted across the spacious living room, and my father immediately started surveying the kitchen. "This house is so big, Kathy," my mom said, almost absent-mindedly. "Don't you think it's a waste for you to live here, all by yourself?" Before I could respond, my father chimed in.
"Exactly.
"There's even a spare room. We could move in, and it wouldn't even make a difference." I froze. Was this a casual conversation, or were they serious? But my hesitation gave them the green light. Within minutes, they decided that they'd be moving in that very weekend, completely disregarding my feelings. "Still single at your age," my mom sneered over breakfast one morning. "You know, Sandy's already married and living a respectable life." I clenched my jaw, but forced a calm reply. "I'm happy focusing on my work right now. I'm not in a rush to get married." My father let out a derisive laugh. "Work? All you do is sit on your computer all day. How much money can you possibly make doing that?" What hurt wasn't just their words, it was the way they spoke them, as if my entire existence was a disappointment. Every day, their comments chipped away at my peace of mind. It was a regular Wednesday evening when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened it, I was greeted by my sister, Sandy, standing there with two oversized suitcases. "What are you doing here?" I asked, stunned. "Oh, didn't Mom and Dad tell you? I got divorced. I'll be staying here from now on," she said nonchalantly, brushing past me as though she owned the place.
"What?"
"You can't just..." "Oh, relax, Kathy. This house is big enough for everyone. If Uncle had given it to me, we wouldn't even be having this discussion," she snapped, stomping upstairs to claim an empty room. I looked to my parents for support, but my mom just shrugged. "She's family, Kathy. Be reasonable." Reasonable? Was it reasonable for me to lose control of my own home? "Mom, look at this dress. Isn't it cute?" Sandy's voice rang out from the living room. My mother gushed, "Oh, it's perfect. You're so pretty, Sandy. It'll suit you beautifully." They both turned to me snickering. "What do you think, Kathy? Not something you'd wear, right? Too stylish for someone who just sits around on her computer all day." My face burned, but I kept quiet. There was no point arguing with them. No matter what I said, they would twist it to suit their narrative. Every snide comment, every dismissive laugh, every comparison to Sandy, it all added fuel to the fire burning within me. I had put up with enough. It was time to take control of my life again. Sitting at my desk late one night, I opened my laptop, not for work, but for research. If my family thought they could push me around forever, they were sorely mistaken. I drafted an email to my uncle, carefully detailing the situation. "Uncle, I know you entrusted me with this house because you believed I would take care of it. But right now, it feels like anything but my home." I hit send, my heart pounding. This was only the first step, but it felt liberating to finally stand up for myself. I needed something to bring a bit of light into my life. That's when I heard from a friend about a litter of Chihuahua puppies. As soon as I saw Muffin, a tiny, black bundle of energy with round, twinkling eyes, I knew he was the one. When I brought him home, his tiny tail wagged so hard I feared it might break off. "From today onwards, you're Muffin, okay?" I whispered, holding him gently. He responded with an enthusiastic woof, and my heart melted. But I knew my family wouldn't be as thrilled. And I was right. The moment I stepped into the house, carrying Muffin in my arms, they started. "Hey, you didn't tell us you were getting a dog," my mother screeched. "Dogs smell." "I can't stand odors," my father added, wrinkling his nose dramatically. "Kathy, how could you bring a dog into the house without asking us first?" Sandy chimed in, her arms crossed. I stood firm. "Firstly, Muffin isn't just some stray I picked up, he was a gift from a friend. Secondly, I'll be paying for all his expenses, so it's none of your business. If you don't like it, you're free to leave." For a moment, their faces turned red with anger. But then Muffin did what Muffin does best. He worked his magic. "Aren't you just the cutest little thing?" my mom cooed. "Look at those big eyes. Come here, Muffin. Do you want Daddy to hold you?" my dad said, his earlier complaints forgotten. Sandy even took out her phone to snap pictures. I blinked, half expecting to wake up from some bizarre dream. Wasn't this the same family that had just been yelling at me? Before long, Muffin had charmed everyone, and the tension in the house seemed to ease. My parents and Sandy were too busy fawning over him to make their usual snide remarks. One afternoon, while I was out running errands, my phone buzzed with a call from Sandy. Her voice was sharp and demanding. "Come back home."
Now.
"What's wrong?" I asked, concerned. "Muffin peed on my clothes," she shouted. "They're ruined. Do you know how expensive they were?" I sighed. "Just wash them, Sandy. It's not that big of a deal. And maybe don't leave your clothes lying on the floor next time." "Excuse me? You're blaming me for this? It's your dog. You didn't train him properly." When I returned home, Sandy was waiting for me in the living room, holding the soiled clothes like they were evidence in a crime scene. My parents stood beside her, their arms crossed and their expressions grim. "This is unacceptable, Kathy," my dad said sternly. "Exactly," Sandy added, throwing the clothes at me. "You're going to pay for the cleaning costs." I picked up the clothes calmly and said, "Why should I? Muffin is still a puppy, and accidents happen. Besides, didn't you say you'd take him for a walk today? Maybe this wouldn't have happened if you'd kept your word." Sandy's face turned red with anger. "Don't you dare blame me. It's your fault for bringing this stupid dog into the house in the first place." "Stupid dog?" I snapped, my patience finally running out. "Muffin has brought more joy to this house in a week than you have in years. If you don't want this to happen again, maybe you should stop leaving your expensive clothes all over the floor." The argument spiraled from there, with my parents taking Sandy's side as usual. But for the first time, I didn't care. I stood my ground, refusing to apologize or pay for something that wasn't my fault. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I had moved into a beautiful pet-friendly apartment where Muffin could roam freely and comfortably. The peace and quiet were a stark contrast to the chaos I had left behind. I finally had the freedom that night. As Muffin curled up next to me, I resolved to stick to my plan. My family had crossed too many lines, and it was time for me to take back control of my life. "You're quite fond of Muffin, aren't you?" I said calmly, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "Isn't it harsh to call him a stupid dog just because he had a little accident?" "It's your poor training. Take responsibility." Sandy snapped, her voice rising. I stared at her, stunned by her selfishness. How could my family think of nothing but their own convenience? Before I could respond, my parents chimed in. "Kathy, shouldn't you at least apologize to Sandy first?" my mother said, folding her arms. "That's right," my father added. "This all happened because of that dog you brought home." I clenched my fists, my patience wearing thin. "Can't you forgive Muffin? He's a puppy. Puppies are like babies. They make mistakes sometimes." "Pathetic," Sandy scoffed. "This situation only happened because of your stupid dog. Honestly, Kathy, you made the right choice by not getting married. I doubt you'd be able to raise a decent child." Her words cut deep, but I refused to show it. "How dare you say something like that?" I shot back. "If you had trained him properly and kept the house tidy, none of this would have happened," she said, her voice sharp with accusation. Finally, she pointed at me and declared, "I can't take it anymore. I don't need you or that dumb dog. Get out of this house."
"What?"
I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Didn't you hear me? I said get out. We don't need a freeloading homeworker here." The irony of her words hit me like a slap. A homeworking freeloader? This coming from someone who is unemployed and living off me? As I stood there, too stunned to respond, my parents joined the chorus. "That's right, Kathy. Leave this house. Your presence just makes everything worse. You're a jinx." Their words echoed in my ears as my anger boiled over. I had endured their insults for far too long. My voice trembled with fury as I finally snapped. "That's it. I've had enough. If this is how you're going to treat me, just wait." Without another word, I packed my belongings, grabbed Muffin, and left. My sister's parting shot rang in my ears as I walked out the door. "This is all your fault. If you'd just listened to me, None of this would have happened. Suppressing a grin, I whispered under my breath, "Enjoy yourselves while it lasts." A few days later, I received an unexpected call from Sandy. "Kathy, help!" she shouted the moment I picked up. "What's wrong?" I asked, feigning concern. "The house. We've been told we have to leave by the end of the month." I smiled to myself. So, what's the problems? "What do you mean, what's the problem? Why do we have to leave?" "Well," I said casually, "I've decided to sell the house." "What?" Her voice cracked. "You can't do that. You don't have the authorities." "Oh, but I do," I replied smoothly. "You see, the house officially became mine a month ago." There was a long pause before Sandy's trembling voice came through. "You're lying, right? Even if Uncle transferred the title to you, you can't just sell it." "I was worried about that too," I admitted. "But after you kicked me out, I consulted Uncle. He told me, the house is yours now, Kathy.
Do what you want with it.
You should get away from that toxic family as soon as possible." No way," Sandy stammered. I heard my parents in the background, their panicked voices growing louder. "Kathy, stop this nonsense," my father begged. "You can't do this to us. We have nowhere else to go," my mother cried. I stayed silent, letting their desperation sink in before replying in a quiet, steady voice. "Respect? That's rich coming from you. Who do you think has been paying for all your expenses these past few years? I reluctantly let you live here because you had nowhere else to go. And how did you repay me? By treating me like a nuisance and kicking me out of my own home." Their protests died down as I continued, my voice rising with emotion. "You've looked down on me my entire life, compared me to Sandy, and insulted my work. But now, it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions. You wanted me out? Fine. But you're coming with me, straight to the streets." My father fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Please, Kathy.
We're sorry.
Don't do this to us." But I was done. "Enjoy yourselves while you can," I said coldly before hanging up. "I don't care. Fend for yourselves, you idiots." With those final words, I hung up the phone with a loud, decisive click. My chest heaved as the tension of the confrontation ebbed away. I immediately blocked every one of their contacts, silencing them from my life for good. As the room grew quiet, I noticed Muffin looking up at me, his round, worried eyes full of concern. "Woof," he whimpered softly. "Oh, Muffin," I said, scooping him into my arms. "I'm sorry for shouting like that. It's all right now. I'll protect you, I promise." I held him close, feeling the warmth of his small body against mine. In that moment, I realized just how much I valued him, this little creature who brought joy and love into my life, even when everything else seemed bleak. Looking back, I was immensely grateful that I had managed to get Muffin away from my family. They didn't deserve him, not with the way they had treated him so poorly. Now it was just the two of us, free from their negativity and toxicity. As I settled into my new life, I couldn't help but hear snippets of gossip about my family. It seemed my parents and sister had been forced to move out of the house at the very last minute, clinging desperately to whatever hope they had left. With my father's meager income and my unemployed mother and sister, their lives had taken a dramatic downturn. Rumors swirled about my sister, who was now constantly nagged by my parents to find a job. Their once united front was now fracturing under the weight of their struggles. Their relationships had grown strained, and their standard of living had plummeted. I didn't care. They were no longer my concern. This was a classic case of reaping what you sow. It served them right. To work whenever I wanted, without anyone hovering over me with complaints or criticism. Every penny I earned was now mine to spend as I pleased, and I made sure Muffin had the best food, toys, and care. "Hey, Muffin," I called out one sunny morning, grabbing his leash. "Let's go to the dog park today." Woof! Muffin barked excitedly, his little tail wagging like a propeller. He seemed more energetic and lively these days, perhaps because the noisy, toxic environment we had escaped was no longer weighing him down. As we walked to the park, I couldn't help but smile. Life was peaceful now, and my heart felt light. I didn't just leave a house behind. I left behind years of resentment, judgment, and hurt. From now on, it was just me and Muffin. I vowed to protect him for the rest of his life, just as he had brought light into mine. Together, we would lead a quiet, joyful, and fulfilling life, one filled with love, freedom, and the peace we both deserved.